LD4P. And in Sprint 0, we've been setting up code bases, and I've been getting on board learning to convert records to RDF. And in this brief demo, we're going to look at one record. This record is identified by its field 001. It's a Castellini record, and it's first converted to MARC XML. And in doing that, we pull in the authority URIs from the Symfony database. So there's a lookup of the URI involved in that initial conversion stage. And then at this stage, we're using the LOC BibFrame1 converter to convert that record to RDF. And without looking at any of the details, you can see that it's reasonably substantial. There are some things we want to modify in our next sprint or two. Once that data is converted to RDF, is to loading it into BlazeGraph. And for example, here we can see we can query BlazeGraph with Sparkle. This is looking for anything that's a BibFrame work. And it's identified a handful of records that I've loaded today. We can look at this particular record. And BlazeGraph provides this capacity to navigate this way. So the point of this was to evaluate a processing pipeline to get from RDF and load it into a triplestore. So at this point, we've demonstrated that we have a processing pipeline that's feasible. And I'll hand off to Josh at this point.
Okay.
And mute. Okay.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my screen shared.
You can turn off your camera.
Or leave it on, no comment, but your camera is on.
I don't see how to actually.
There's usually like a little green.
Oh, that thing, I got it, okay.
Second window.
Okay, as also part of this sprint, we did some work on the MARC to BibFrame validation suite. One thing that we did was we changed the validation suite name to MARC to RDF Validator, with the idea being that we'll eventually be able to support different types of converters, not necessarily ones that convert from MARC to BibFrame only. So to that end, in some of the changes we made to this project include changing the description of the project to include information about different converters that are already in existence, the Library of Congress MARC to BibFrame converter, and then the LD4L Labs, sorry about that, the LD4L Labs Bib to LOD converter, which is being currently developed, and then also the Aliata converter. So that information is updated in the README. Other things we did for the validator in the sprint is adding configurations to the validator for the different converters. So whereas originally we had helper methods and configuration just for the LOC converter, now we have helper methods for the Bib to LOD converter and whatever configuration parameters those take. We generalized the spec helper to include the different helpers for different converters. So just a general helper for all MARC to RDF converters, and then specific ones for the LOC converter, which is this xquery one, and the Bib to LOD converter. And then getting more specific, general MARC to RDF helpers include things that basically load RDF or XML, RDF XML into graphs to then do queries and run tests on, and also to create MARC XML files, and just validate that we have good MARC records when loading them. And then more specific, the XQuery helpers include specific configurations for that converter, and then methods to actually do the conversion for that converter. So this is for the original Library of Congress converter, and then one for the bib to LOD converter. So importing the config settings for that, and then methods to, once we find out exactly how we're going to run that converter, to do tests upon it, looking something like this, that we would then call that converter and it would do its conversion jobs. And that's it.
Okay. That ends the first demo of this LD4P tracer bullet work.